Hi, everyone.
Hi guys, welcome. As you heard, that's our thought leader, Jessica, and hopefully you guys have been here along the way with us in our Power Up podcast advertising series. But for anyone new just joining, we're so happy to have you. This is our final session in our series. And back here again is our webinar series thought leader, Jessica Kupferman, for today's session, Ad Campaign Success. Now, Jessica is a digital media strategist with over 15 years of experience working in the internet marketing space. Combining a mix of creativity and business development, Jessica works with companies, small businesses, and podcasters who want fresh ways of selling and growing online. And before we start, we'd like to review some key logistics to maximize your experience. You can hear us, but we cannot hear you. If you have any problems viewing the presentation on your computer, it could be a security issue on your end, and you may need to contact your IT person. But if you find that you need to contact us via email, please send an email to webinar@aaaa.org. We'll help you if you have any technical issues, and if you disconnect for any reason, just go back to the email invitation and log in again. Now, as always, we'll have a Q&A portion of our webinar, just if you have any questions, you want to clarify anything. But as always, you can send through any questions you have for Jessica throughout the webinar. You'll see in your go-to panel there is a questions section. This is where you can type it in and submit it. We'll save your questions for the very end, but please do send them on through. We also want this webinar to be as engaging as possible, so we're going to have some more polls to throw your way this time. So keep an eye out for that. We'd love for you all to participate. We'll share the results. It's totally anonymous, but a great way for us to learn more about you. And last but not least, we encourage everyone to live tweet during this webinar. And don't forget some of our great hashtags and our handles that you see at the very bottom of the screen. And now, to kick things off, everyone, please welcome Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, um, especially to the 4As, because I think this topic is so important. There's so much opportunity in the podcasting space, so many players, and I would love to see more brands get into advertising in this medium. So I'm super excited to talk to you guys today. So without further ado, let's get started. Today's webinar agenda, we are going to do a review of last week's webinar and just kind of recover the players in the market very briefly, review a little bit of the pricing and what you'll need to start a campaign, some keys to podcast advertising success, how to tweak your campaigns effectively once you've gotten started, the best key performance indicators for each marketing goal. So there's a little peek happening there. So let's go quickly over the players. So first actually, I might as well start down here. We have tech solutions and hybrids. So these are part podcast hosting platform and part content creators and part tech solution. So they offer both host read and dynamic ad insertion, but they also host podcasts and they create their own content. So there's a lot of hybrids out there. But let's go to the networks. The networks are owned by larger corporations or media networks such as CBS, NBC, ESPN, and they are creating their own content. So those shows are usually hosted actually on a platform called Art19. But these are the big networks like NPR, WNYC, etc. Then there are big agencies. There are about 4 large advertising agencies that represent podcast advertisers only. The advertisers are their clients, and then they buy usually shows on the big networks, but they are starting to branch out. Then you have smaller networks, and just as a reminder, these are privately funded clusters of shows with a common theme or goal. So for example, the Dice Tower is a cluster of shows all about gaming. You have Almighty Baller, which is all about basketball, etc. Small agencies, which is very similar, which is basically the category my agency is in, where I represent both individual podcasters as well as brands of all different sizes that want really specialized and individual attention. There are hosting platforms, like the most common ones for podcasters are Libsyn and Blueberry, and they sell the inventory that of their clients that are hosting on those platforms only. And then there are individual shows that sell themselves. And lastly, there are search engines. So basically, Pod Search, Cast Plus, these are places where you pay to list your show, and then they invite advertisers to build campaigns based on who's in the search engine. And then just to illustrate sort of the differences in the pricing, big networks tend to charge anywhere between $18 and $50 CPM, which is cost per 1,000 downloads per episode. And then large agencies try to sell between $20 to $40 per 1,000 downloads per episode. And then, as you recall, the recommend amount of episodes is at least 4 in order to see result, because repetition is really important in these campaigns. Small networks could be any price. Some are not CPM based. Some go based on a spend on the network. Some include their social media in such a strong way that the pricing isn't really CPM, but based on their reach, their full reach. Small agencies like mine try to sell between $22 and $30 per 1,000 downloads per episode. And they're really flexible on what's included. If a client wants social, we can negotiate for that. If a client wants blog posts or email marketing or web banners, there's lots of negotiation involved here, but that's the general pricing. Hosting platforms have probably the largest inventory, although the agencies can really sell any show. They're not exactly shows that we, if I have a show that's not signed with me, I don't have access to their download information. I have to ask them for it. Whereas as a hosting platform, it's really a good start because they already have everyone's download numbers. And so when you contact them and you want to do a campaign, they can tell you what the biggest shows are in any genre, as well as how long they've been listened to and, when people tend to drop off, etc. And they sell around $20 to $25 per 1,000 downloads per episode. Individual shows are very similar to the small networks. It could be anything. Some will not sell by CPM. They have decided that they will not do any ad for less than $100 a show, etc. And they'll need direction from you as far as what you want out of them for a campaign. All the shows need your copy points and your marketing goals, but an individual show will also need direction from you as far as how many you want to do, how long the spots should be. Many of them don't understand the market and how to sell. Some do. When they've been in the space a long time, they do, but there are many that don't. So going this way with individual shows can be a little more work for the buyer. Search engines a lot of times are host negotiated. So the way a search engine works is when you do a listing, you add how many downloads. And so the numbers may not be verified. There are Cast Plus does verify their numbers because they ask for an RSS feed, but many of the search engines don't. And so the price you're being asked you may want to, when you make contact with the host, ask them for verification of their numbers if this is the way that you want to go. And then again, the hybrids. Now the hybrids are very cheap to very expensive because dynamic ad insertion is often on what they call back catalog, shows that have already gone live. And a lot of the shows, podcasting started in 2006, so these shows could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years old. They're still being downloaded though, but you're not going to pay $50 per 1,000 per episode. You would pay more like $6 per 1,000 per episode. If you're going back to 2011, it doesn't make sense to pay full price. So last time I also told you that I had done some research and interviewed a lot of players in this space, one from each category: the big agencies, the big networks, the hosting platforms, etc. And I wanted to get a general consensus on what they would want to tell agencies that were just getting into the space. So here's some of their advice, and I fully agree with these statements. When you get into podcast advertising, make sure you have a matchmaker. There's really too much inventory to go with individual hosts. And I illustrated in the past slide a little bit why and how that's true, because not only are there so many separate hosts, but not all of them understand CPM. A lot of them, when you pitch them for the first time, or if you're interested in their show, may not know what to price. They've never done a sponsorship before. They don't know how to do the read, etc. So it's best to have an agency or someone to sort of recommend shows that have had good um, returns so far, that do a really good job with their reads. Make sure that you introduce new products to the world with this medium. If you have new products to introduce, this is a great way to go because the listeners are early adopters. Use as much possible repetition for a successful campaign. One show, one test will never show you any kind of results. Allow the host to use personal experience as often as possible. Make sure, if you can, that you give them sample products so that they can really do a personal anecdote about what they're selling. And then if you can, let go a little bit with the brand messaging. Let these people, the hosts, use their opinion and therefore their influence for your ads. Be very selective about the shows you choose. A blanket on the most popular shows is going to be a giant waste of cash. And that's true. If you have your product, no product is for everyone. You don't want to be, I mean, it's not the same as doing you don't want to do like the equivalent of a Super Bowl ad here on podcast, because even the shows that seem like they're for everyone are still niche. Even Serial about true crime is still niche. It's still niche in the sense that not everyone likes true crime. So even though it seems like a percentage of the population, it still might not be the right fit for your brand. And then if you can, try to have a strong call to action, and we'll get into that more later on. And then they also gave advice on what you should never ever do when doing podcasts. And one woman said, don't create your own content. So right now the trend is to do like the GE sponsored and branded entire podcast. Some of my experts said, that listeners are too savvy and they can smell where they're being sold to, and they tend to stay away from branded content. So you may want to think about that if that's a route you're planning to go. Don't flood the market and then step away. In other words, if you are going to do a bunch of shows, and actually I just had an advertiser ask me this morning, I gave him a proposal with about 40 shows. He wants to know if he can just do like a spray and pray. And I'm not sure what that means, but I hope it doesn't mean one episode on all of them and see what happens, because nothing good is going to happen from that. You have to sort of pick a few and do at least 3 or 4 to see if their audience responds. Most of the successful campaigns are repeat, so keep testing until something sticks. Don't nitpick the host. So if you're, in other words, don't write a script that includes the URL 4 times, 5 times. If you hear a sample, don't nitpick their sample unless they really haven't done it correctly. Don't run your radio ad on a podcast. This is being listened to very, very differently than radio. It's consumed differently, so you want to market differently. Don't do a lot of product placement because, again, listeners are too savvy. And if you do, choose the right host, somebody that's a huge fan and can talk about it almost humorously, and make sure it's somebody who does your product and service justice. And again, don't work directly with hosts, but they were really particular about this because it's too big of a marketplace and it's unmanageable. So now I would like to ask you, and last thing, sorry, don't buy as if it's radio. It's not a broadcast. It's a super, super niche type of medium. So please buy it as such. And so the next slide is, oh my gosh, I have one more. How many more are there? This is, I think, the last one. Don't search for shows in iTunes. There are so many shows that aren't being ranked for various reasons. And actually, a viral video was just posted this morning by Mike Rowe, and He said he was in the top 20 podcasts of all time, and one of the listeners was like, "Excuse me, I looked in iTunes and you're number 98." That's true. But when he was ranked 94 in iTunes, he had 400,000 listeners per show. Now he has 2 million, which means that iTunes is not really a good ranker. They sort of just decide who gets to go where based on what those people like that day or what they think is noteworthy or what they think is interesting. So if you're looking for the top ranked shows in iTunes, you're not going to get the best shows for your genre. You sort of need to dig a little deeper than iTunes. Okay, we are now at the poll. Shelly, take it away, girl.
Awesome. So for those who've been here, they know how our polls work. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the first poll. So you should see it up on your screen. The question is, let's say Bob's Red Mill wants to buy advertising and they have $30K to do it. What's the best way to go? Is it large network, like NPR, and buy across their offerings? Is it large agency and let them recommend and choose large shows? Small networks, such as Radio MD? Is it small agency and let them recommend large shows and niche? Or last, hosting company and their inventory. So we'll give everyone a couple seconds. As I always say, feel free to ask your neighbor if you're in a big group. We know you can only submit one answer. So tell us, which one do you think it is? Hit submit. And then,
don't be shy.
Yeah, we're at a tie right now.
Yeah, I want to hear your opinion. What do you think, Shelly? If you were buying, what would you pick?
Oh man,
It's a tough choice.
that is a tough choice. I'm not sure. I think maybe the fourth one.
Small agency?
Yeah.
Yeah. People are liking the small agency. I'm very proud to say. Um, yeah, I mean, the large ones are good, but it depends on how big your company is, whether or not you'll get their undivided attention.
Right.
Um, hosting companies, they're all really good choices. It really is so dependent on who your clients are as an agency. But establishing a good relationship with whoever you pick is really important, whether it's an agency, a hosting company, network. You definitely want to work with people you like. I mean, that's in every situation, right?
Very true. Very true.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we've given our audience enough time, so I'm going to go ahead and close the poll in 3, 2, and 1. All right, let's see what our audience said. So we have a 50-50 split. 50% say small agency like me and let them recommend large shows and niche, and 50% say hosting company and their inventory.
Very interesting. Well, that's good to know. That makes me happy. At least I'm on the list, right? Okay. So next we're going to talk about podcast campaign success. So first thing is, in order to make sure your campaign is going to be successful, play with placement. If your listener is the kind of listener that, for example, let's say you have a health company, you know that your listener is probably jogging during the show. Maybe you do want mid-roll because they're not going to be able to stop in the middle of a workout and fast forward through it. So really the whole idea is you want to make sure your ad's being heard. Now, what scenario would there be within which you'd want to do a post roll? These are the cheapest ones because, technically you're not sure if someone's going to stop the show here, stop the show here. The ones that are compelling stories or cliffhangers, like audio dramas, a post roll is a good idea because they are hanging on till the very, very end. But otherwise, there's still some situations where the pre-roll is appropriate too. Like, for example, comedy shows are good with pre-roll because you really start out wanting to hear what the comedian has to say, and then you may drop off during the middle or get distracted or be busy. Another situation is a show that I really like when I can't sleep. It's called the Sleep With Me podcast. And the whole idea is that he tells stories in sort of a humdrum way to get you to fall asleep. I mean, a mid-roll, not that good of a plan because people are sleeping. So the chances of them being, I mean, it may be heard, but only by the subconscious. So if you're into that, I guess that's the way to go. So anyway, so it just depends on what your goal is. What are your listeners like? Are they commuting? Are they jogging? Are they listening to the end? And then before you buy, get creative with genres. Let's say you want to talk to moms. Does that mean you buy on a parenting show? I'm a mom, I'll tell you, not necessarily. It's literally the last thing I want to listen to. I listen to stuff about my health. I listen to stuff about pampering myself. I listen to shows that make me laugh. I listen to shows about getting the heck out of here. I'm not listening to parenting shows. So if you want to reach those moms, maybe go with just a women's show that doesn't focus on the, I mean, it depends. Obviously, if you are a company that, are promoting breastfeeding items, then yeah, you probably want to do the parenting show or the pregnancy show. But other than that, try different genres. See if a creative genre goes better. Make sure you offer an experience for the host. Allow them to try your service. Send them a sample. Send them on a trip. Give them a chance to experience what you're offering. It isn't always easy to do this, but even a 30-day trial or temporary access will allow you to make them a fan, a crazy raving fan. So try and spoil them if you can. And then no scripts allowed. Really refrain, if you can, from being too specific about what to say. You want to make sure they're clear about what the greatest benefits are to your product and service, but then step away and let them say it in their own words. And then how can you avoid them skipping through your ad? I mean, one way is um, get a sample. See if you would skip it. Ask them to do a read before the show goes live. Everything comes down to delivery. It needs to be really natural. So listen to it. If it's not a natural introduction into the conversation, if it's just like, by the way, I have a new sponsor. Here it is, blah, blah, blah. Or if it sounds like they scripted something, you may want to ask them to, please try to make it a little more natural, a little more normal. And then request social and track their social. This is something as a small agency I can do that maybe big agencies can't do. When I onboard a show, I get their user and password for every possible channel that they would do a campaign for, so that if, for example, you want to do a campaign on one of my shows and you also want Facebook, I have access to their Facebook so I can go in and see the insights. I'm not praying that, that works or it starts conversation. Like, I'm making sure, and I'll report back to you how many times it was read, how many times it was liked, how many times it was shared, etc. This way the coupon code also can be reiterated. So, despite the fact that there's repetition on the show, if somebody missed it by chance and they follow them on social, they still might be able to see the coupon code if it's being tweeted about or shared on Facebook. So now let's talk about tracking. But before we talk about how to track this, I want to talk a little bit about why to track it. And I I hesitate to talk about this a little bit because it makes it sound like I'm skirting an issue. But how do you track a newspaper campaign? How do you track a TV show? How do you track your normal radio? If you're not direct to consumer, aren't you doing these campaigns in the hopes that sales in general will swell, that your conversation socially will swell? But yet when we do digital campaigns, we're very, I don't want to say fussy, because that's not the right word, but I know that our superiors can be really insistent that we have a tracking mechanism so that they can see the exact results of their digital spend. But remember, podcast advertising is a bit of a hybrid. It's not fully digital. It's only digital in the sense that the content creator is making an MP3. It's being consumed the other way. It's being consumed like traditional medium. It's being consumed in people's ears. It's entertaining. It's not the same as a web banner. Unless you buy web banners, it's not going to be the exact same. So how important is it to track podcast advertising? This is the one hesitance, the one obstacle, the one objective that people have, the one objection that people have about podcast advertising is the tracking. And it's talked a lot about in our industry. And how do we make it more trackable? And when can we move towards streaming so we can track it like streaming? It's not streaming. It's special because it's not streaming. When people listen to streaming radio, they tune out just like they do regular radio. Podcasts are special because they're not streaming radio. So that said, you do have to track separately. You do have to keep those things in mind. Okay, I'm going to come down off my soapbox and let's talk about the best case tracking scenario. I mean, to be honest with you, it's going to be all in your control. The best way to track a podcast campaign is with a custom URL or landing page that you provide so that you can see what traffic is being driven to your website or brand at all. As long as that host says the custom URL, regardless of sales, you'll at least know, okay, yeah, people are noticing and coming. The second best way is with a custom offer for just their listeners or a coupon code. You can see who redeems this. Now, those of you who are who do email marketing as well, this is kind of like the open rate, right? Like everyone talks about when they do email marketing, what's the open rate? Well, the open rate is not the success mechanism. It's not a good KPI because people who use Outlook have a preview pane that doesn't show that they've actually double-clicked and opened the email. So your open rate is probably actually, and maybe you didn't know this, so here you go, something you learned today besides podcast advertising. Your email open rate is really worthless. Probably double the people have seen that email. What you want to do for an email, now I'm talking to you about email campaign, what you want to do for email marketing is click-through rate. And so this is kind of the same thing, like, the coupon code, they may not remember it because they're not in front of a computer. Whereas like with email, they are in front of a computer, so the click-through rate is a good indicator. The coupon code is maybe not a good indicator. You remember that they said Hello Fresh, but you don't remember if it was, if the show is like this one here, if it's Sleep With Me, the Sleep With Me show, the code is Sleep With Me. Well, is it SWM? Is it Sleep With is it Sleep With Me? Is it Sleep W Me? Like, what if they don't remember, they don't type it in properly, but they still might remember, to go to the site and do it. So here they have both. They have pick up a pair at sleepwithmepodcast.com/sleep phones and use Sleep With Me for $5 off. So if they go to this, what if they only remember sleep phones and they Google sleep phones? First of all, they won't get the coupon off. But second of all, he's not going to get the traffic for that either. So if you can do both of those, it at least gives the podcaster a fighting chance of getting credit for the audience that they're sending to you. And on a side note, sleep phones is a flannel fleece headband that you put on with flat headphones that are attached. So if you're a person who sleeps with headphones and you don't like earbuds, they are the bestest. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to move on from that, but sleep phones are the dream. Okay. The key performance indicators, KPIs, what to pay attention to. Well, for direct response campaign, obviously the coupon redeem. Sales in general, with or without a coupon code, because you could have boosts of sales, especially right after. So let's just say you picked an 8-8 episode. Look at your sales 8-8 through 8-12 or 8-8 through 8-20. Do you have a boost that's directly correlated to your campaign? And the traffic. Do you have boosts in traffic both to the landing page but just to your normal website? And I'm not talking about like, oh, we had a boost, but it's not the same as every other day kind of boost, but like this show went live and then within 48 hours we saw a boost, or within 72 hours we had more traffic than we did the previous 72 hours. That's what I'm talking about. I mean, you may have to put someone on your success tracking that is smart enough, or give them instructions to go back and do like a week-to-week scenario where they can see. I don't want to say smart enough because that's not nice, but I think you know what I meant. And then opt-ins. Let's just say that they didn't redeem a coupon, but they got on your mailing list for some reason, or maybe that's the goal. Give them something free to opt into, or a chance to win, or a contest or something like that, and you get more opt-ins, more people on your email list. That's a good way to know whether or not this campaign's been successful. And then for branding, first of all, the number of downloads. I mean, that's a great way to know whether or not your ad has been heard by more people. If you paid for 50,000 downloads per episode, you want to make sure that you got the amount of downloads that you've paid for. Again, website and landing page traffic overall, as well as specific. Increase in brand conversation online. Are you getting more social mentions, whether it's pertaining to the podcast or not? Sometimes people will hear about something on a podcast and just start chit-chatting about it. Do you have listening mechanisms that can track that, even if they're not specifically related to a direct response campaign? So let's just say, for whatever reason, you did 2 shows and you don't see any result whatsoever. Here's what we're going to do in order to tweak the campaign. First, I do recommend you wait at least 2 or 3 weeks. People don't, even though 77% of people say that they download and listen within the first 24 to 48 hours. That is true, but you still want to wait and see if, again, the repetition thing is something that's going to help people remember to take action on your ad. So let's wait a few weeks to see a response. And then when you do see a response, listen to the ad. You should be doing this before your campaign starts, but if you haven't, re-listen. The podcaster is probably going to do it different every single time. Listen to every ad. Give constructive notes. Maybe they're not saying something the way you would say it. Maybe they're not doing something the way you would want it done. Change the read. Maybe the bullet points that you've given them aren't the most exciting aspects for the people who are listening. Maybe they're reading it too slow. Maybe they're reading it too fast. Maybe it's too enthusiastic and it sounds like pandering. Maybe it's not enthusiastic enough because the person's topic of the show is a little, like I was doing, I was judging for the Academy Awards for podcasters. I know that's a thing. It is a thing. And I was listening to a lot of Society and Culture, and they're very NPR, like, hi, this is Jessica. Today's sponsor is HelloFresh. Like, maybe that's not the right avenue for you to take. Maybe they have a great audience. Maybe it's your target audience. But maybe you don't want someone who sounds slightly distant and thinking about stuff instead of actually acting in what's going on. So I could never be an NPR reader. Can you tell? But maybe it's not enthusiastic enough and you just want to, change, ask the person to be more enthusiastic, ask them to do the read differently, change the placement in the show. Maybe people in this case are skipping. If you're doing a mid-roll, ask them to switch to a pre-roll 1 week. See if it makes a difference. Loosen the reins. Tell them, forget the bullet points. You've done HelloFresh. What did you think about the food? Did you enjoy the food? Like, just talk about, take the bullet points away. Tell the people about your experience and why you liked it or didn't like it, who's it good for, who it's not good for. Let them say whatever they want. I think in the, I don't know if I gave you this one as a case study or an illustration, but MeUndies did a campaign where they basically told the host, I want the podcaster to say whatever it is they want to say, and if that means using profanity, so be it. And then this podcaster took it upon himself to describe MeUndies using every possible profane statement they could think up, and they used all the 7 that George Carlin says to use, and then they made up some more. And they said it was by far their best-selling ad. So maybe loosen the reins and see what they say on your behalf, or the opposite, tighten the reins. Maybe don't let them have free rein if they're not going to be concise enough about what's great about your product. So maybe you listen to the ad and you think, you know what? They really aren't getting to the point here. They're just talking about their own personal stuff. This isn't really an ad, it's an anecdote. Now it's an anecdote, not an ad. And so maybe you tighten the reins on them a little bit. Or, lastly, change hosts, change shows. There are so many opportunities out there. Don't waste your money trying to like stick it out for 8 weeks if it's not working. you should have a cancellation clause, like a 30-day cancellation clause. So if you do buy 8 or 12 weeks of a show, this is whether you're testing or whether you've gone forward, make sure you have time to just say, hey, you know what? I don't think so. This isn't working, or your reads are great, but it's not giving us results, and then try another show. Don't give up on the genre. Don't give up on the medium. Just try a different show. What if you do change shows? If you have to change shows, here are some of my recommendations. First, the size. So I have an advertiser right now that is advertising both on shows that get 2,000 an episode and 20,000 an episode. And she was ready to pull those smaller shows after 2 weeks because she said, you know, beyond the to-do list, I'm getting way more response than I am with these other shows. And I'm like, right, but he has 10 times the amount of people listening. And she was like, oh, yeah, that's a good point. All right, we'll stick it out with them a little longer. I mean, that's important. You expect great return regardless of the genre, but the smaller shows, they have a perfect audience. They just need a little more time. Or if you don't have that kind of time, do a larger show. It's possible that a 2, 3, 4,000 download per episode size is just not going to give you the return that you want for as fast as you want it. So maybe go for a bigger show. It does mean a bigger spend, but hey, what are you going to do? A different niche, sort of like the parenting thing that I illustrated. Maybe the target audience isn't who you thought they were. I'll give you an example. A lot of times clients come to me and they want people who are working in cubicles. They want people who are trying to, flee the nest of their corporate job, and they want to be put on business shows. Well, guess what? If you hate your job, you're not listening to a business show. There's no way, unless you're dreaming about being an entrepreneur. But when I hated my job, and I have been there, and many jobs that I've hated in the past, the last thing I was listening to was more about how to succeed in a job that I hated. No, I was listening to comedy. I was trying to escape my hellish reality. So it's possible that the people that you're trying to reach aren't listening to what you think they're listening to. Boy, I just got very personal there, didn't I? I hope it wasn't offensive, but it's possible that, people hate their jobs. What can you do? Of course it's possible. Lots of people do. Okay, so besides niche, the host. Maybe you want the exact same genre and the exact same size, but this particular host just isn't delivering it, or it's possible that they're not as influential as you think. And here's another example. I personally happen to think, and I've said this before in this series, that celebrities are not as influential as your everyday show doing a podcast, your everyday Joe doing a podcast of the same size. I think that celebrities are affected. They don't monitor their own social media, and so listeners and audience don't really feel like they have the host's ear. Whereas my friend who does the Ben Franklin's World show, like she's a professional historian. She's someone who cares very much about history. I mean, she's just someone who decided to do a podcast about it. She's not, they're not doing drunk history where you have comedians coming in and redoing. It's totally different. She's running her own social. She interacts with her audience on a frequent basis. They have their own Facebook group. She probably has way more influence than Malcolm Gladwell doing revisionist history, because she's someone who cares very not that Malcolm doesn't care passionately about the subject, but the audience maybe feels closer to her, because Malcolm Gladwell is a super famous dude. So changing the shows could mean changing the host and just switching up whether you want someone who's more affected, less affected, more famous, less famous, or who, again, just delivers it in a more or less enthusiastic way. So let's go back to the poll and discuss what should they do. We're going back to Bob's Red Mill, and we're going to tweak this campaign.
All right. So poll time, guys. You guys know what to do.
Poll time.
The question is up. So 3 weeks in, Bob's Red Mill needs to move things around. What should they do? Change the script, keep the shows they're working with. Change the placement, keep the shows they're working with. Change the shows, keep the genre, keep the script. Or switch genres, but keep the same script.
So this is less of a poll about, like, what's the right answer, and more of a poll of, like, if you were running this campaign, what would you do? And I mean, again, it's going to depend on how dedicated this brand is to their script. Because if you have a client that's like, my script is gold, then you're going to probably want to change the other things. If you have a client who's like obsessed with the Malcolm Gladwell show, well, you're not changing shows. You will probably change the placement or the show. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. So voting is key. I'm just wondering what you guys would do. What do you think you would do, Shelley?
Man, you keep putting me in the hot seat.
I know. Well, I'll tell you what I would do. Probably for me, I would change the placement first because I'm a person that thinks that pre-roll is actually more valuable than mid-roll because
Mhm.
I was a podcaster first, not a radio personality. And radio does put a big emphasis on the mid-roll. I'm a person that listens to the pre-roll but figures out how to skip in the middle. So I think the mid-rolls should be less valuable. So I would change placement just to
That makes
see.
sense. That
Yeah.
also seems like not too much of a drastic change. Like it's a nice
Yeah.
kind of medium shift to see how those things work. And if it's not working, then take a little more, changes to maybe change the script or the show. It's kind of like this
Yeah.
nice medium level. I like that idea.
Yeah, changing the script is good too. Like, and I do have advertisers that are like, you know what? Let's have them say this instead, which is cool because then you're not yanking the show. It's a whole to do because you have an
Right.
insertion order and you have a monetary commitment. But I mean, there are some advertisers that are just like, yank it. They don't want to do it anymore as fast as possible. They just want to try and get out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So it looks like so far the attendees are with us as far as not creating drama.
Exactly.
They either want to change the script or the
Playing it
placement. It's
safe.
pretty split right now.
Yeah. Okay, let's go
Uh,
ahead and close the poll. Let's share what everyone is thinking. So I'm going to close it in three, two, and one. So there you go, guys. You guys are on 50-50, kind of aligned with me and Jessica are talking about. So
yeah.
50% say change the script, keep the shows they're working with, and 50 say change the placement, keep the shows they're working with. Very interesting.
Kind of nice. Yeah, let's not rock the boat right away. I think those are good answers. I think those are probably the right answers. So we're nearing the end of our time together. Before we do, I just wanted to share some of these testimonials. I haven't done too many quotes or testimonials from advertisers so far because I kind of like to give a big push at the end. So Ira Glass, describing podcast advertising at South by Southwest last year, said, "It's crazy, it's amazing, it's unbelievable, it's boom time." And then James Walcott, famous Vanity Fair columnist, said, "Podcasts are essentially radio on the installment plan, a return to intimacy, wombed shadows, and pregnant implications of words, sounds, and silences in the theater of the mind." That's a dramatic dude right there, is what that is. He's a dramatic writer. That's very dramatic. But I think he has a point in that, like it's like the old timey radio shows. I don't know if your parents ever forced you to listen to those, but mine did. I've listened to all kinds of, what was it? The Spy? What was, help me out here. You're never going to know because you're too young, Shelley. Um, Dragnet, I think. There used to be an old radio show with cop, like cop dramas. My parents used to make me listen to it, and it was very dramatic, just like you described. Mike McLaughlin, the director of digital at Palisade, said it's 5 times as effective as buying one website, which is amazing results. Harry Huang from Sling Media said we've seen 2 to 3 times the engagement in podcasts that we've seen in radio, which I believe because I think people go the extra mile to really listen to podcasts. Radio is just there. So that makes perfect sense to me. Um, Mark DeChristina, director of marketing at MailChimp, said, "I think it would make sense for larger companies, although selfishly, I would like for them to stay away because I enjoy being a big fish in the pond." That's kind of funny. And then lastly, with podcasting, we discovered a way to develop a more intimate relationship between the stories and our audience that was perfect to tell our seller stories. Annie Lepardis, Director of Leadership and Seller Communication at eBay. So just to wrap up, the key takeaways today. Listeners, and this is overall through all of the webinars, listeners do have higher buying power than the U.S. population. Podcasters have higher influence factor. The key benefit is the opt-in and mobility. Their ads are very effective at changing perception and message retention. Um, Also, if you're going to buy, definitely don't buy as radio, buy as broadcast and podcast, buy as niche, and really be careful about which shows you choose. And when you need to make changes to the campaign, rather than yank, do some minor tweaking to your script, to your placement, and offer as much success measurement that you can control as possible, whether it's a URL, coupon code, even if it's not direct to consumer, anything you can give the podcaster that you can see the result of is definitely the way to go as far as success measurement. And I think that's it for me. I'm a little early this time, and I was hoping to be a little bit early because last time I ran over. So I wanted to give an opportunity for questions. I'm hoping that you guys have some questions for me today or some questions about the genre overall. Um, let's see. Boy, I mean, I'm going to get bombarded here with all the questions. You got to be careful.
So yes, you unleash the power
I
back
unleash the
inside
hounds.
So again, guys, if there's anything that Jessica went over in this session that you want her to dig in a little deeper, or something that you're personally working with when you're with your clients, or something that maybe she didn't go over, this is the time to ask any questions. Now, of course, we can't unfortunately hear you, see you. We definitely want to hear from you. So again, you'll find in your go-to panel the question box. This is where you can type in any question that you have. I'll be checking that area and reading that question back to Jessica. So definitely submit some things in. But I see we have some questions coming in already. So Jessica, the pricing difference is a little off-putting. What do you think is a fair price?
Well, so I have a unique perspective in that I have been in marketing and advertising for a really long time, but I am a podcaster and I know how much work, like the level of work between a large show and a small show is enormous. Um, it's actually comical sometimes to hear like the larger shows talk about, like the jobs they post, for example, is like sound designer. Like a lot of the independent podcasters would kill for a sound designer. They're podcasting in their closet with like their mic and a I mean like it's silly. So on the one hand, I think, but those better produce, I don't want to say better, those highly produced corporate funded shows, they have huge audiences. So paying more per CPM, I think makes sense simply because, again, it's like paying for the Super Bowl as opposed to like local cable. So that said, um, when you're doing it yourself, you're doing the pre-show notes that you have, and then you record. If it's an interview, you have to get all that information, and then you do all the editing and all the show notes, and then you put it up, then you do all the social media. So I like to say around 25 to 30 CPM is fair for both ends. I don't think you should have to pay for the production costs of a show that's largely funded, but I don't think you should negate the fact that the smaller shows, just because they're not CBS, doesn't mean that they shouldn't be able to make a living doing this. This is an art and a science, and I think everyone who's doing it works really, really hard. So that's why my range is around 25 to 30, and I try to get more if they have more social clout. But yeah, the difference is a little off-putting, and I know as advertisers, you sort of are probably thinking, yeah, but if I can get $12 CPM, I'm going to do it. Try and remember that ESPN can afford to give you $12 CPM because their shows are at 500,000 downloads or more. The smaller shows can't afford that. So if you do really want to go niche, maybe prepare to pay a little bit more, sort of like an artist in jewelry, right? Don't you pay less at Zales than you do when you go to an art fair, because those people are in their garage hammering away at the metal, whereas like there's probably some big factory somewhere churning out diamonds for Zales. So it's just different. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that was helpful.
Good.
Okay, next question. What do you think the importance is of celebrity endorsement?
Um, If it's genuine, I think celebrity endorsement is great. I think a lot of people try to do, I think celebrity endorsement for influence marketing is probably more effective because you're getting a peek into their Instagram and seeing what their life is like. I think when celebrities do audio, I don't think it's as effective, and I also think sometimes it's the opposite. It's ineffective. I think when you have a non-celebrity do an audio read, a host read endorsement, and they've had an experience, you feel like you can really trust them. It's like reading Amazon reviews. You don't know those people, therefore they're more trustworthy than, Michael Jordan selling Nike. He's obviously getting paid. I mean, and both parties are getting paid to do that. Well, let's say both parties were getting paid to do it. You still want to trust the average person more because maybe they have less riding on whether or not they tell you the truth. Does that make sense? Like Michael's got his whole basketball reputation riding on the fact that you buy these sneakers, whereas somebody who's being paid to do a review or not do a review, they're going to be honest because they're just like you. So I think it really depends. I mean, also as usual, it's going to depend on the product too.
Got it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, you recommend getting a sample ad, but also not to hover over the talent. What happens if we have changes to the sample? Do you think podcasters are difficult to work with?
um, Podcasters are a fun bunch. They are extremely technical people. They can be very introverted, and up until the last couple years, many of them have been doing their show for years and years and years with no constructive criticism that they've had any clout in. Like people will give them reviews, and if they're negative, they're just like, "Oh, that person's a hater." And so, oftentimes, if they're new to sponsorship and advertising, and this is their, or this is their first big sponsor, I'm not going to say they're not open to constructive criticism. I think a lot of them are very eager to please their partners and their sponsors, and do a really, really good job. That said, I think, if let's just say everyone on this call is married and you're trying to give constructive criticism to someone who's sensitive. Let's say your partner doesn't look good in their outfit, for example, right? You're not just going to tell them that's the ugliest thing you've ever worn. You have to be gentle. You have to be considerate of their feelings. You have to make sure this isn't going to start a war today. So this is sort of the same thing. It's like they are true partners. You don't want to hurt their feelings, but you still want to tell them what will fit your needs and what won't fit your needs. So if you're not married, that's good advice for you for later. Try not to hurt someone's feelings when you're giving them constructive criticism, or I mean, because there's just no need to do that. And I think that a lot of the podcasters, they pour so much into these shows that if they've done something wrong, they can be really hard on themselves. So I don't think they're difficult to work with. I think they just need a little love and care when they're being told that they've done something wrong. That's all.
Okay, awesome. And then I think I gave you a couple questions in that one. Sorry, it was a long question.
Yeah,
But
did I not?
what
Yeah.
happens if we have changes to the sample? So you recommend getting a sample ad, but what if there's changes to the sample?
Well, so actually, this is what's good about being an agent is like I'm their friend. So when I say, "Hey, would you mind putting a little less, this is how you say the name, or make sure you say the name at least twice during the ad," like they're not necessarily going to get mad at me, but they might be hurt if it was, but I mean, if you have changes to the sample, I think that's okay. You have to make sure that you get samples if you want them in advance, because sometimes I get advertisers that want to start, and podcasters record in advance. Some of my shows record a month in advance, but are willing to go in and insert even though the show has already been done. Like a lot of my August shows are done, but I still have advertisers buying in August. So if you get a sample and you don't like it, first of all, I need to know what the changes are right away to tell them. But then also, you may be causing a little bit of stress in doing it. I mean, it's not to say that like the ad has to be perfect. Make the changes, make sure the changes are made, make sure the podcaster is saying exactly what you want them to say and exactly the way you want them to say it, because that's what's going to drive, achieving your goal.
Mhm.
So just be timely about listening to it and giving response. I don't know that, the team, if you get a sample, I think having it go all the way to the top and come back down within a week is going to cost you. You may have an ad up that you don't want, and it's already run, and there's nothing you can do about it because you've had everyone listen to it and give you changes. I can't always, what is it called? The group. Why am I missing words in my head today? Um, Community involvement when it comes to making decisions doesn't always work with podcasters because they often have a time crunch because their shows are episodic and they come out on a schedule.
Mhm. Perfect. So something that I know you went into the last session, you kind of reiterated nicely in this session. So there's a question around that. So you mentioned a lot of places to get started, but if you had to choose one, who would you choose? Networks, agencies? Where would you start?
Hmm. I would start on the I mean, I hate to toot my own horn, but I like small agencies, even the ones that aren't me. First of all, there's something about small agencies where, like, I know the other small agencies and we all work together. So choosing one is sort of choosing all of them. Like, I'll go to my other agents and see what shows they have and recommend theirs as well. Um, the reason to go to a big network is, for example, if you have a science product, you're going to want to advertise on How Stuff Works, the How Stuff Works network. If you definitely know that you have a show that all the NPR listeners are going to go after, you're going to have to do on NPR. But generally, I would not recommend going to the big networks because they can only sell their own inventory. If you wanted to go to the hosting platforms, they have huge inventory, but and they do sell at a lower rate. So, but you have less interaction with the hosts themselves. It's the agencies that really give you the interaction with the hosts. So that's why I would say maybe large or small agencies. Even the large agencies have interaction with the hosts. So I think agency is a way to go. You do end up paying. I mean, agencies do take, same as you guys take an advertising agency fee. They do as well. Many of them will negotiate and split the fee with you or whatever. But again, it always is going to depend on your goals and your budget. But I feel like creating a relationship with the person who's doing the ad is important, but also if you go through individual shows, that can be tricky. So you need a matchmaker, but one that's in touch with the talent. That's
Got it.
probably my best answer. That's probably terrible. I just went to every single thing. But I mean, I probably went to every single answer and told you why to and not to work with them. But um, yeah, I think agencies are good because they really know what they're doing as far as the space and the people doing the ads, large or
Okay,
small.
awesome.
Yeah.
Good open perspective there. Okay, I think we have time for one last question. So the question is, if we want to get started in podcast advertising, do you recommend we listen to podcasts or have a buyer that listens?
Well, um, I do think you should know what you're getting into. The buyers don't necessarily have to listen. They may be biased. Um, it helps to have, for me as an agent, it does help to have clients that are enthusiastic about podcasts because they're just excited about trying the medium in general and it makes them just better partners. That said, podcasting has been around for 10 years. It's been a long time since I've listened myself on a regular basis because I don't have a long commute and I have a toddler, so I very rarely have time to have audio in my ears. Whereas when I had long commutes, I did it more. That doesn't make me a, a bad agent, though. It doesn't mean I don't know what I want or what I need out of an ad. So do you have to listen to the whole show or a show? I think finding one that you could listen to at least once so you get a handle on what you're buying and why it's good is important. I think telling you that, like, if you're not a podcast listener, you won't make a good buyer is silly. But having someone who knows what they're getting into is helpful.
Perfect. Okay, good answer. So I see
Thanks.
that we have a minute left, so I'm going to selfishly take that minute back to me and just first give a huge thank you to
Thank
Jessica
you.
for being here with us throughout the entire series. It's been a fantastic experience. We hope you guys have learned a lot of really critical information of the benefit of podcast advertising. And again, if you have any questions for us, you can email us at webinar@aaa, that's 4 A's, .com. Jessica's information is also on the screen right now, so if there's specific questions that you want to ask her, you want to pick her brain, it's up there, her
Oh
information.
yeah, but I was just going back to the bundle. If you haven't bought the bundle, here are the, yeah, sorry.
Exactly. No, you were hitting on it right there. So again, this is a series, and a lot of you are bundle purchasers. But if for some reason you missed some of our past sessions, you can see the topics listed on the screen right there very quickly. If you want to get access to that past content, you absolutely can. Just email us, and we will tell you how to get access to that. Perfect. We get everything in one slide.
Yay! Thank you
So,
so much for having me too. It's been an
yeah.
honor teaching you this. I don't take it lightly. So thank you so much for your attention and for the 4As for having their trust in me. It means a lot, and this is obviously I'm very passionate about it. So thank you for being here and learning about it.
Well, thank you. It's been a wonderful three-part series. If you guys want access to today's presentation, all you need to do, as always, is just fill out our survey that comes out right after the webinar. We really appreciate the feedback. It will take you 2 minutes tops. Once you fill it out, you will get a link to the PDF. And if you have any more questions about what we offer here at the 4A's Learning Development Team, just shoot us over an email or give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again, Jessica. We hope to have you again
Thank
here
you.
soon.
I hope so
A
too.
pleasure. And we thank everyone who took out an hour of their day to join us. And we hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care, everyone.
Bye.